Today I'm speaking with Wiesje Verpeut. Wiesje, thank you so much for joining me today.
For having me.
Absolutely. And I know I probably mispronounced your name at least a little bit there. So in a moment, please correct us with the right pronunciation. But just for a quick bio, Wiesje was born in Ypres, Belgium. She lives just 5 minutes from the French border, which is really cool. And she's Flemish. She's in part of the Dutch-speaking region of Belgium. She is the vice president at Nu Le Féminin, which is an NGO, a non-governmental organization. She's also a goldsmith and jewelry designer. And I met her because just a couple weeks ago, I was interviewing Amedu or Wisdom Oriazele, who's in Nigeria, and we were talking about his story as well as his Lovewise initiative, which is also an NGO there in Nigeria. But I got to meet you because you work with him, so I want to hear more about how you all got connected. But Wiesje and her 9-year-old son live there in Belgium in an old house from the 1800s, which is really cool. And it's really cool to see your artwork on the wall behind you. And she grew up in a very evangelical family, which is not common in Belgium, but did eventually deconvert. So we're here to hear your background and your story. But before we get into the meat of that, could you just tell us, number one, how to pronounce your name correctly and a little bit
So,
more about yourself?
oh, you got it quite good, huh? My name is Wiesje, and then my name is Verpeut. So is Dutch pronounced,
I'll
but
need to practice that a little bit, but I'll work on it.
my second name is Christine. So yeah, I deconverted from Christianity, but I still have my name there. So yeah. Many people who can't pronounce my first name, Wiesje, they will call me Christine. Yeah, it
Gotcha.
happens.
That's very helpful. It's a nice backup. Tell us more about yourself. What's life like there in Belgium? And tell us about your hobbies or anything fun.
Yeah, life is good here. That's to my opinion. I mean, not everybody will agree because Belgium, I don't know if most people know, but is highly taxated for many people who work here. But I think life in general is good. Many people live more individualistic. We have a high rate of immigrants, I think almost up to 15% in general. So I live in a small village, as you said, close to the French border. And I like the peace and calm of here. I like to be a lot on myself in silence. Um, my hobbies are like jewelry design, and I also do it professionally. I do all kinds of design. I was textile designer. I studied that in my 20s. And in general, I'm quite artistic. Can I say like that? Creative and maybe a little bit weird. Sometimes you will hear my story.
And
I'm
I was gonna,
very passionate too.
yeah, absolutely. I was gonna ask you about how you got involved with Amedu. How did that whole connection start?
Well, that is a very long story. That is actually more to the end of my
Okay,
deconversion, but
we can. That's fine. We can save it for that part. No
we'll
worries.
get to that point. So,
Okay.
but I was there like 2 weeks ago, and yeah, it was the fourth time that I went to visit him. So now we were like 10 days together in Lagos, and we always take time to have deep philosophical talks because that is what we are both very passionate about,
Hmm.
how to look into ourselves. And that's also a big part of our deconversion, or how we mostly put it, that we have grown over above Christianity. So
Hmm. That's awesome. That's awesome.
both like that very much.
Yeah. Well, very cool. I appreciate you filling us in with that introduction. And at this point, we would love to just kind of hear your story. If you could take us back to the earliest days and how did your exposure to Christianity begin?
So when everything started for me, I think it was really when I was only 5 years old. As you said in the introduction, I was born in a evangelical Christian family, and my parents were very deep into it. You have to know, in that time, they were almost one of the first evangelical families here in this region. They came from I think, a Canadian evangelist who had come to this region, and he had started evangelizing, and my parents were one of the first who got converted to this kind of denomination. Now, so I was never baptized in Catholic Church, which is normal in our culture. Even most people don't go to Catholic Church anymore, but traditionally, most of the kids are still baptized, certainly in the smaller cities where I'm from. So when I was 5, we were on holiday on the southern French-speaking part of Belgium, and I got in a boat on a river with my aunt and my niece. And the boat just drifted off on the river. The river was wild, probably it had rained a lot. And they lost, how should I say, they lost power over the boat. I mean, it was a small boat, but we were on the river, 2 ladies and a little girl. I was 5. So there they started the conversation because my niece and my aunt had also converted to Christianity. And they said they were a little panicked. And they said, Wiesje, whatever is happening, do you have Jesus in your heart? So that was the moment that I really took Jesus in my heart. And I still remember it very well because I was always quite aware of everything that I was doing, the decisions that I was making. And so that was really the point that I said, yes, I am going to surrender my life to Jesus.
Mm.
And they too, my aunt and my niece, afterwards they were still like, do you remember in that boat? That was the time that you took Jesus in your heart. And yeah, I remember. I was also in panic. Can you imagine 5-year-old? You are on that boat. You are not knowing what is going to happen. You see the house from where you are staying going away, and you see the other two that are in panic. So I was like, what is going to happen? How are we going to be saved? And they were saying, like, we should shout, we should do something. So I don't know how far it was because you cannot remember when you are 5 years old what are the real distances. But we had drifted with the boat already a while, and there probably someone had heard our cries. Now, that man, as I remember, was very tall, and he had thrown a cord um, towards us so we could catch it. And this is the way how he could take us aside. And so once we got on the other side to the border again, we were in a kind of forest. So we had to find a way back to the house. And I was just like, what is happening? And we were walking through the woods. And my aunt and my niece were talking, and the man was gone. So that's what I remember. So for me, it was, and it has always been like I took Jesus in my heart and an angel came to save me.
Wow.
And that is how I took it very seriously. And I had something like, I am really saved. And I felt very secure in that, like really very secure in like I have made the best choice of my life. So I hope you can imagine how deeply this was rooted from this very early stage in me. My
Mm.
parents were very serious about it. I was very serious about it. I was even more serious about it. And so
Wow.
this is how I grew up. And I must admit that as a child, because of other experiences that I had, I will just mention it very shortly. Also at 5 years old, I was sexually abused by one of my grandfathers. And I also had like a weird spiritual experience of seeing the devil in my room. Now, it must have been after this taking Jesus in my heart, but it was also at 5 years old.
Wow.
I was laying in my bed and it was so dark. It was just immensely dark. And I don't know how much you are into spiritual experiences, but it was as if I could feel the darkness that you can touch it. That's how it felt. And I wake up at night and I see this dark silhouette next to my bed that I can only compare it later to having seen the movies of oh my God, Star Wars, like Darth Vader, like such a kind of silhouette next to my bed. And at the end and on the beginning of my bed, it was like I felt demons tearing at my bed as if they wanted to grasp me. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. I just I didn't know what it was. I was terrified, like really terrified. And on the other side, I could see like balloons with faces in. And only later, because I'm saying this was at 5 years old, only later I could see like faces of, for example, Adolf Hitler in it and other people that we connect with like darkness. And there you had the window, and I saw like this black cat. The city, maybe that's a funny thing. The city, Ypres, where I was born and where I lived at that time, is called the city of cats. So in the Middle Ages, they threw the cats from the highest tower to kill them because they were thinking that there was witchcraft in it. And they burned the witches. I mean, that was very common. Like every 3 years, you still have the celebrations in that city that is celebrating the cats and the burning of the witches as if to burn the evil. So I well, I know now a little bit mentally how our mind works and how these experiences have come to pass, but I'm just telling how it was, how real this was. In the morning, I got up and I tell my parents, terrified, what I had seen that night. And they, not being aware of many spiritual things and experiences that we can have, certainly they were still in evangelical church and not that much into Pentecostal. Later on, they went into the other denominations. So they didn't really know what to say on it. And so I told them, and I said I didn't want it to go to bed. I mean, no way that I was going to be in a room again. So they said, you know what? There were two of my brothers also sleeping in that room, but it felt like they were just like miles away when that was happening. I mean, I couldn't touch them, I couldn't move. So my parents only said, you know what? If it happens again, you just say in Jesus' name, go away. So yeah, as a little girl, there I was the next night. I was terrified. I remember. It is almost like yesterday. And there it happens again. Again, I see that dark silhouette. Again, I cannot move. And I don't know from what kind of force that I was able to speak. But I spoke the words in Jesus' name. go away. And I saw that silhouette just running the out of the room, and it never came again. Though from that day on until my beginning of 30s, I had nightmares of persecution, of being killed in persecution, of all kinds of witchcraft and dark rituals that I had never anything to do with, that I don't know how it came in my life, but that was there
Mm.
until there's another story, got away when I was beginning 30. So I had many, many nights of fear, of waking up in sweat, trembling, like, yeah, most part of my life. I'm only 42, so it's only like, yeah, 10 to 12 years ago that this is gone.
Mm. That's so much for a small child to go through. I can't honestly quite wrap my mind around it. I went through several years of sleep paralysis, which is a very different issue, but I know the idea of waking up in terror a little bit from that, but very different from what you're talking about. It just sounds so intense. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was. And it made that as a child, I felt myself very different than anyone else because my Christian friends did not have the same kind of experiences of what I had had. But my non-Christian friends at school, neither. So I never really felt like I belonged anywhere. I only had Jesus in my heart. I only had God. And that relationship was very intimate, was very real and very intense in a good way. Um, as a child, I can see that I was really observing my life as everything is just happening to me. It's not me. It is happening to this person. I don't have power over what is happening. It just happens. And I am the observer of what is happening. That is how I looked at it. And in that, I made mental constructions. I felt very safe within my own mind, but the connection with the outside world was quite different and awkward. Um, yeah, I also many times I was clothed differently. As I was creative and artistic, I was searching myself in these kind of ways. So
Mm.
yeah.
But through this process, you were going to church or to the whatever the group was and getting more exposed to the Bible and to Christian teachings.
Yeah, I was a good student. I was very passionate about it. Um, I wanted to know this God, like really, I wanted to know him. And I had something like, I will know him. Now, when I was 12, I was exposed to another kind of sexual abuse about of someone in the church. And in that stage already, there had been, how should I say, so many things had been blamed towards me as a child. Apparently, I don't know how to say, but I had this expression that attracted people or that was different, and certainly men. So when I went on Christian camps or something, there were always a bunch of boys falling in love with me, even when I was just 9 or 10 years old. I mean, I was afraid. I was afraid to be just myself because you never knew. Then they said, okay, we will just come and get in your bed. I was terrified. And my uncle, who was like the head leader of these Christian youth camps, he just said, you know what, it's her fault. Have you looked already to her eyes? So they were showing pictures of somewhere that I think I was reading poetry. And he just said, look to her eyes. she's seducing all men. So I got from very early age this stamp of being a seducer, of being someone like a whore, like a prostitute. I mean, from my innocence, where I didn't have anything to do with that. On the contrary, I just wanted to run away from all of this. But it was
Mm.
embedded into my life. It was laid upon me as a stamp. And
That's so sad.
it I mean, everything in Christianity is about purity and being pure. I felt myself as the most pure being. Um, it wasn't my fault that somebody touched me or couldn't keep his hands off me. Um, but as so many times, things get reversed. So I lived that life with seeing the other side and being treated as shit, as dirt, as oh my God, I got all kinds of stuff towards my head. And I couldn't understand. I had something like nobody really knows me, nobody really understands me, nobody knows who I am truly in my heart. But I felt loved by God, like really. I really felt loved by God. I mean, He was my comfort in every way. I never felt um judged by God, you know? It was just not there. So when growing up, when I was 12 and later, I read my Bible. I was studying it. Um, Meanwhile, my parents, when I was 14, 15, 16, they had really trouble in their marriage. Now, I have to say, um, whatever I'm saying about the people that what I have gone through, I love them so much because I have overgrown and I see from the perspective of love and there is no judgment. I'm just telling this story that has happened to me. Um, my parents themselves have gone through horrific things themselves in their youth. And I knew that. And I was aware of that. And to this day, I have a lot of respect for whom they are and what they have done with their life. They are still very much into Christianity, but the people that they have helped because of what they said they self have gone through, I admire them for that. But to me, I had something like you are telling this to people how to heal, but you are doing the opposite to me and you don't understand it.
Mm.
No, anyway. So they had a time of very difficult time in their marriage because they were going both through healing themselves. And that reflected in our family. They had so much fights that I was taking care of my three brothers. I took like responsibility for them. They were 4 to 5 evenings in the week. They were gone for church or all kinds of meetings, so you were a lot alone. But then when they were home, I they suddenly were there to tell me what should be done, while most of the time I was already doing everything myself. And I, when I was 15, I had my first boyfriend, and his father was like an image of Christian being. I mean, and the father got to know that I was abused, and he had said something to my boyfriend that someone who has been abused, um, how was that again? I want to say it right. Um, it just came down to they are worthless. You should not put your time in it because that's not going to work out. And that came
Mm.
in so deep into me. I couldn't get into that anymore. So for 4 months, we stayed longer together until I found the courage to stop it. but I came into a very deep depression. So I was, yeah, 15, 16, I was depressed, like really depressed. I cut it. How do they say?
Yeah, cutting.
Molesting? Cutting?
Yeah, I think they call it cutting.
Because I wanted to feel. I had something, as I told you before, I was just observing. So I had very few connection with the material world. So cutting myself was like I can feel something. I was so depressed that I said to God, like, if this is life, I don't believe in you anymore. Um, I don't want it anymore. The only problem that I had was that I only fell asleep while praying. And I mean, praying was not like praying and asking things, it was rather like talking to God. I mean, so I had something like, I don't want to believe in you, but yeah, here you are. And I'm going to talk to you because you are the only one that understands me. Um, so that was the only way I could fall asleep and then go into another kind of night with nightmares.
Hmm.
uh, it was really a crazy time. And I remember that there was that one day that I said, it's done, it's finished. And I took my bike and I wanted to crash myself before a car. I said, okay, let me just make an end to it. I didn't want it anymore. Um, what was a great source of that, I will come back to the suicide attempt, was that they found out in church that many girls had been abused by this man when I was 12. And my parents were very angry that I never told them because of the other things that had happened before. And it came to before court. And so you can, I don't know the exact English word, you can ask like money so that, how do you call it?
I'm not sure
Uh,
what the word would be, but I know what you mean. Some kind of
so
retribution.
yeah, retribution, that was the word that I was searching for. So you could say like, okay, we want like to cover what he has done. But my parents said like, no, 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 we cannot do this. We are Christians. He is a Christian brother and he has a family. And when we do that, um, the family will get in trouble because this man had also a lot of kids and they were quite poor. And I felt very betrayed by my parents, I must admit, because um, if I had had that money, I told them later, I could have studied fashion design, which was like my only goal in life. I wanted to become fashion designer or um, test pilot. Okay, two different kind of things. It speaks to the creative part and the very rational, crazy other part of me. So,
Well, you could have
but
designed fashion while you're in the plane flying. Yeah,
of
make it
course,
work.
of course, nothing is too difficult. And I'm open to many things. But that was, I mean, later on they said, no, we cannot afford us to have you in that school because in Belgium you have a very known fashion design school that many worldly known fashion designers, they go there. So I really felt betrayed by my parents. I had to go to a psychologist. I knew exactly what to say so that I could get out of it. I understood the whole drama and the mental play. So I just said, let me not go there. I mean, I knew what to say so that I never had to go there anymore. And that she just said, this girl has no problem at all. Um, so I tried. to jump before a car with my bike. I said, let's just end it. I mean, it's like a click in your head, huh? You're just done with it, and it must end. I want to jump, and sometimes something just grabs me. There's nobody there. I'm next to the street, and I have something like, what is this? I started crying because I had something like, again, God is saving me. Again, someone is here to grasp me. There must be a reason that I'm alive. There must be a reason that I should live. I promised that moment never to be depressed again. My depression was gone. There was a deep sadness, which is sometimes still there. I turn myself around sometimes in melancholy. um, but the depression was gone, and I had something like, there's a reason why I live. Then shortly after that, I met with I got together with my next boyfriend, and he later became my first husband. He was not a Christian. But he and his family got me out of further of that depression. They helped me to after school so that I could do my entrance exam to start fashion design. I passed the exam. I could start. But there it was. Soon after I got married when I was 21, I think. Yeah, I was 2 days 21. So 27th of July. And after the marriage, my husband left Christianity. So he had first converted while we were together. So it was like a safe time for me to get married with him. And then
He became a Christian so he could proceed with the relationship.
yeah. Well, I wasn't aware. He only admitted later after I got married. And I think to him it didn't really make that much sense. He came from quite a atheist background. Non-believers, though traditional. I mean, traditionally, in most people would say like, we believe in something in Belgium, but we don't know what, or no, there's no God. But then they just do the Catholic traditional things. So this is less and less. I mean, I have seen this changing in my lifetime. Now, a lot of people, certainly in the bigger cities, don't get baptized in Catholic Church anymore when they are children, and not even get married in Catholic Church anymore. Many have left, even got out of the registers of Catholicism in Belgium because of the many sexual abuse of Catholic Church. So that's a huge thing here in Belgium. He quit Christianity, and I was one vessel of chaos. I must admit, I was one vessel of chaos. I didn't know what to do. My mind never stopped talking. There was just chaos. It never stopped. I had these nightmares. My husband was very good to me, and to this day, I'm very thankful for whom he has been to me. But I could not cope with the fact that he wasn't a Christian. Now, while we were together before we got married, I was very deep into hardcore, the underground hardcore metal scene. So very hard music. And he too, he was into that. So every weekend, we went to these kind of hardcore shows, and all our friends were in there. We had a good time. But then he started to be independent and did silk screen printing, which we both loved. And but he started to print all these Satanist stuff of the other bands, and I had something like, what the fuck is this? I shouldn't use the word, but I did. I'm like, no, no, you cannot print t-shirts with 666. No, you cannot print t-shirts with images of devil horns. I mean, I didn't feel safe in my house anymore. I had something like, I don't have a problem that you do silk screen printing, but that's way over it. And he also made web design, and it was the beginning. So he needed assignments to so that we would be able to cope financially. And he got this assignment of a escort, a prostitute. And for him, this was laughter. I mean, it didn't mean a thing to him. But to me, and with what I had been through in my past, that was, I mean, explosion. It didn't work. I had something like, you cannot do this. Uh, Right now, I just laugh with this kind of stuff. But at that moment, it just didn't work. I had something like, come on, you dragged me into this. I never wanted that. The only thing that I wanted was purity, because of everything that had been thrown to my head. Also, like, you are like this, you are that. I had something like, no, 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 none of these things I want in my house. So I didn't feel safe in my house anymore. That, next to the fact that I still couldn't feel. I mean, everything in me didn't work. So I said, okay, I need to find help. I'm going to a psychologist. And my mother and father worked together with a Christian psychologist, and I went to her. She was a very nice lady, and she loved me a lot. And I came into that deep inner struggle of marriage and divorce, because I couldn't stay in that relationship anymore. I could see that he was very good for me, but on the other hand, it was just blocking me. I wasn't safe. So she said, I can see that this marriage never had to be. And she convinced me. I mean, other stuff happened too, but it would take us too long. Um, and she said, like, put the steps and get out of it. I mean, divorce. So I did that. And I think it was quite a hard thing for my husband and I, because we were really good friends. And to this day, I would love to meet him again and just say sorry about several things that have happened, that I look so different to it right now. Not that I would want to return, but I would love to say, like, look, I didn't know. I'm sorry. Um, but then so we got divorced. And I even got deeper and more passionate about my faith. And I got into a house church, which was very Pentecostal and everything about spiritual battle and all these kind of things. So I don't know if you know anything about spiritual mapping and
Yeah.
these kind of, I thought it was very interesting because I was very interested in history and connecting dots. I mean, my mind works with connecting dots, so that was very interesting. Now, and here I come to the point of where my deconstruction started, but in a complete other way than most people, or to what I see that most people come to. So there was like a apostle of Austria, and he came to give these preachings about spiritual warfare. But because I had entered this house church later than the others, and we were all very passionate people, the pastor or the pastor's wife, she said to me, listen, when you got into these things, this is really dangerous. And we want you to listen to the first preachings that we have already heard, because if you don't know how to pray, this can cost your life. So I said, okay, let's listen to them. So I was home alone, and I was listening to these preachings. And one of these preachings was about the secret place where you can meet with God. And I didn't know any better because having grown into this evangelical church, everything that was spiritual or like what we would call supernatural experiences, you don't have anything to do with that, or meditation or out of the body experiences or whatever. So this apostle, he was preaching and he said, I am going to teach here stuff that many people say, oh, this is interesting, but very few really do. And when you say this to me, this is like something like, the others don't do it, I will do it. I will do it and I will get there. Because my mentality was, if God can meet with Moses, I can meet with God. I mean, that was, I had something like, I'm not going to be one who stays there in the camp like the other Israelites. No, I'm going to go up to that mountain and I am going to meet God, because I had something like, if God is love and he loves us so much, like, why would he only meet with one person? Would he not rather want to meet with everyone? And in that, why do these people are afraid of God? They just don't want to go. They say like it's for Moses because they fear. But it's not God who says in the Bible, don't fear me. And like the people are, they just honor me with words, but their heart is very far from me. I had something like, no way, no way. I am going to meet God. Sure. I said, it doesn't matter. So this apostle was telling how you could come into your deepest inner rest and how you can meet God there. And he was doing this like every day. Of course, this is just a kind of meditation. But I didn't know, because I didn't know what meditation was. I mean, you, as the evangelical Christian, you don't meditate. That's New Age.
Right.
You don't. So I didn't know what it was. I just said, they gave it a word like soaking. And I said, I'm just going to soak in the presence of God, no problem. So he was telling like the first time you go to that place, it really takes you a lot of time because of all the things that you have to put out of your mind to come to that deepest rest. So it was a Saturday afternoon and I didn't work. And I see myself laying in the sofa in my house, doing all this stuff, like bringing my head to peace. Or what he would have said, like reconciling with God, whatever that you think that is still between him and you. And he said, when you do this, always something happens, always, just always. And I had met with him, and I could always see in the eyes of people when somebody was honest and real and when they were not. Because of my past, I had grown this kind of intuition. So I knew that he was like the real deal. Let's just call it like that. And I knew that he knew about me too. And I do this, nothing happens. Meanwhile, my one of my cousins came with her kids. I had to take care of her kids. And they would have stayed, but then they went home. And in the evening, they are gone, and I am in bed, and I'm saying to God, I said, listen, I have gone through all this kind of stuff, but nothing happened. But here I am. I am really in peace. And I had a very overwhelming peace within myself that I never had felt before. And when I said that, suddenly there came that light before my eyes, as if the sun is just in front of you. I mean, like literally just in front of you. I was shaking to my core. It was as if I was evaporating. I mean, I could not stand in that light. I mean, everything in me was just exploding. I heard that sound, which was like very, very, very sharp, like high vibration. I don't know, frequency. It was crazy. And it came, I don't know how long it stayed, but then it went away, and I was just crying, and I was just shaking in my bed. And I said, God, is this you? I said, is this really you? Like, what is this? And I said, if this is you, I cannot come into your presence anymore. Now, the moment after it, it came again, that light, but it was just, it was less, um, less bright. Can I say it like that? I don't know. I mean, it wasn't that shaking, but out of that light came one hand with a new ear, and it was just putting a new ear on my ear. And then the other hand with a new ear, putting it on my other ear. So when I got these new ears, I knew that my life had completely changed, as if I had crossed the border. I knew I could not go back. I knew that something so significant had happened in my life that changed everything. So I went to the church, and I tried to tell my friends there, but they didn't, it was as if they didn't even hear what I was telling them
Mm.
while I was still shaking on my legs. I mean, they could just see on my legs, but it didn't go through. And I didn't know what to think of it, because I had something like, what happened? I don't know anyone else who had this kind of experience. So when I got home in the afternoon, there was like a sadness in me that was overwhelming. I was just crying, and I felt alone. And I said, God, but what is this? And he said, I heard his voice. He said, but you reject me. This is the sadness of what you're feeling. You reject me. And I said, I don't want to reject you. I mean, if this is you, he says, I want you to come in my presence. I said, okay. And so I went to lay down back in my soaking sofa. And there I felt that kind of healing, like a breastband that was all over me. And it healed my heart in such a deep way that I didn't know. I was just, I was just thankful. And I felt that bond between God and me had just become so close. Now, even before that, I don't know. No, it was after that. I went to Israel with an international group of this kind of church. And there was only one other Belgian couple with me. And that Belgian couple, every evening they went to walk with each other to talk throughout the day. Now, I was alone, I was single. And I looked at that and I said, that's really great. That's really wonderful as a couple to have that kind of intimate way of walking together in the evening and talking everything through. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do this with God. And this is how it started, that evening after evening, night after night, I went to walk in the park or wherever I was talking with God, because I had something like in the Garden of Eden, God went to walk with Adam and Eve. So he can come and walk with me. And I talked everything through, every emotion, everything that happened in me. I talked it through. I was just so open, more open than I could ever have been with any husband or any friend. There was just no shame, nothing. I didn't have anything to hide because he knew everything. So what was I supposed to hide? And I knew that this was more about me than about him. But I had this thing like, but he likes spending time with me. So there's no problem. And I walked this park in the city so many times, and people said, "But you are crazy! Like, what are you doing? Like, you can get raped or..." And I said, like, "What are you saying? Like, I am walking with God Almighty. Do you think that anything can happen to me when I am walking and having time with Him? Like, what is your faith about? If you don't know this kind of God, what are you talking about? I mean, you guys, you are just saying something that you believe in God, but you don't walk it out. Nothing. It's not even real." So I was very passionate, like really passionate. In this time, I had just so much time in what I call the presence of God. I went to work. The only thing I wanted to do when I got home was to be in the presence of God, to be in that soaking state, in that peace state. And when I was there, I was just gone. I would now call it like what people would say the void, but it it brought so much peace to me. I had so many spiritual experiences that have brought deep healing. Like, for example, things happened, like I got free of these nightmares. I got free of all kinds of fear that were so deeply rooted in me. And meanwhile, I just felt loved, like really loved by this God. I mean, it happened that I had hard times at work. I mean, meanwhile, the outward life of me was still like a mess. So many things were just still happening. I lived a life of stress and things happening that if in 2 weeks nothing severe happened, I was thinking like, okay, then I will have it double. The things will come so hard to me. I mean, like financial trouble in church. If it wasn't trouble, it was in the family. If it wasn't, there was always something in my outward life that piqued stress in me. So I had no other choice than to live deep, deep, deep inside of me with this God. And
Mm.
there were times that I was in the car driving, and I suddenly had that awareness, that voice that I could hear that said, "You know what? I just love you so deeply. You are marvelous. You are great." And it healed me. There were also like things what we would have called miracles happening, multiplication of stuff. I mean, things that I can explain them now mentally how these things can happen. But normally these things don't happen in most people's life. Um, but I was there, and even in my house, when people came, they said, "What is this here? This atmosphere is so different." Even non-Christians came and said, "What is this in this house? There is like a fragrance here that is different. There's like they called it like a supernatural kind of peace. As I told in the beginning of our talk, like this darkness that you could touch when I had these nightmares, it was as if you could touch that peace that was in my house.
Mm.
And I just loved to be there. I had a very tiny little house, and then, I mean, many things happened. I cannot go into all details. My son got born, and his father was repatriated while I was pregnant back to Guinea because his papers were not in order. Finally, after Dauda was 3.5 months old, he could come back to Belgium, remarried, and everything changed. That is a big one. There has also happened a lot about my son. I knew that I would have, this voice had told me you will have a son and his name has to be like David, Emmanuel, which I knew David stands for my beloved and Emmanuel, God within us. Everything that I had heard from this voice about my son came to pass. I knew that he would be born too early. This voice had said, I will take his father away because he's mine. I didn't understand that. So after when I was 3.5 months pregnant, his father got arrested to be repatriated to his country. And my mind could not handle it. I had something like, I cannot believe that this is God. I mean, God is one who brings a man and a woman together. He doesn't separate families. So my mind said, this is not God. And I tried everything. I even worked myself into depth to get his father back into my life and back with us because I wanted to have that family together. While that voice had told me, I am going to take him away. I am his father. I didn't understand. So his father got finally back, and it was as if it was just another person, not the person anymore that I was with before he got repatriated. We lived in terror so much that at 9 months old, my son Dauda, his real name is Dauda Emmanuel. Dauda is David in African. So Dauda got into hospital and he didn't want to eat anymore. 9 months old, refusing to eat. Done. In hospital, he eats. His father comes in. He doesn't eat anymore. His father goes away. He eats again. Myself too, I end up in hospital because of his father doing so many psychosis. I was just, there was just nothing of me anymore. My parents and family had something like, what are you doing? Like, this is crazy. I mean, they didn't agree with the marriage, but then, yeah, there was this kid. They didn't know they wanted that he would stay in Africa, but I got him back. And one day in August 25th or 24th or 25th, he threw me throughout the house and tried to kill me. So I was able to call the police. We had to flee for 3 months, Doda and I. We had to go somewhere where he did not know where we were. And I had to ask the divorce, so that was my second marriage. In 4 months, the divorce was spoken out, and my lawyer said, like, I never had a situation with a kid that in 4 months the thing is done. Never. She said it doesn't happen with a kid that it is so fast. So I had something like, I knew very well that I had not listened to my heart or to that voice that spoke in my heart. And I knew that voice very well. But I had listened to the voice of my mind, my lower mind, thinking that God is in the way that I think he should be, the voice of what the Bible would say that he is. But he was not the voice of the Bible. He was that inner voice that had given me new ears to hear. And I was aware that this was one of my biggest lessons in my life, that I cannot say God is like this because the Bible says it is. The God that I was following, or whom I called God, was that one with whom I had a relationship inside of me that loved me perfectly, unconditionally. But it wasn't that God necessary from the Bible. Though I read my Bible. My son was asking to me 1 or 2 weeks ago, Mama, how many times have you read the Bible? I said, I read my Bible once or twice a year, completely. And then in between. So I know my Bible very well. But I had this thing like, the Bible was not the ultimate authority for me. It was the one I was having that relationship with, that had revealed himself as what I called God, that had the ultimate voice over me in my life. And even, or I called it the Holy Spirit, even one day that voice said to me, like, can you even put aside your Bible? Because are you worshiping these words, or are you worshiping me? Are you addicted to your Bible? Can you put your Bible aside and just trust that your way is going to be led by me, and that nothing is going to happen to you what doesn't have to happen? So I trusted that voice a lot more, because I saw that everything that it said came to pass exactly what it said, and it gave me insights into the Bible, but also into life, into people. It gave me wisdom. I mean, I was praying every day, give me wisdom, insight, and discernment. Give me the fruits of the Spirit. That was like, let me be love. Let me be that love for people, just as you are love. God was for me love. Of course, I couldn't understand everything, and we can come back to that thing like hell and everything. But I knew that I could trust that voice more than whatever I was reading in the Bible. So there was no point. If I had a problem with what was written in the Bible, I could go to that voice and said, like, listen, if you say that you are like that, I don't understand why this is written. Show me what it means, because I know you are love. I know you love me. You have shown me. So show me what this means. Show me the back. Show me what is really meant with this, or what has been changed, or whatever. I mean, I wasn't that, can I say, easy believing. I knew that things had been changed in translations and all these kind of stuff. I had looked a lot of documentaries about all of this. So I had something like, I'm going to just keep trusting you. And I went further and further into that until I got to my third marriage. And I got married with a man he is elder in a church. I mean, he's like the example of evangelical Christian. I have known him since my youth, but we connected again, and after a couple of months, we got married, because you don't have sex before marriage. I was never good in that, but now it had to. So we got married, and I continued to have like these spiritual experiences. I continued to stay in that mode of meditation or soaking, and he could not grasp it, because of being very evangelical. For him, this was like new age. I wouldn't say like new age, but he had something like, this is not what it is supposed to be. It is the Bible and nothing but the Bible. Then Corona came. And at that point, I was listening to a lot of documentaries about CERN and opening the gates. I don't know if you know things about CERN and opening the gates, and I was listening to it from a point, a Christian point, but the one that I was listening to had a lot of insights into what was happening about Corona. And I was linking this up with many things happening in Revelation. And so the day that we came into this lockdown, I just remember saying here at the table, I said, what we have known before is gone. And in that summertime, 2020, again, so many things happened spiritually. I had several out-of-the-body experiences that gave me other insights into the working of the mind. And there was a prophet of the United States who came. And I mean, there's just too many things. But one day he was just talking about that God is not outside, but he is inside. Now, I knew that already, but it was like something that went so deep into me. And at that point, I was having this awareness. I called it that I was walking with angels. Now, I'm looking a lot into what it is, our soul journeys. I mean, there's a lot of study that I am doing nowadays about soul journeys and what is our soul and how it is connected to the universe and everything. So what I am saying, these angels, I understand that these were souls that I'm walking with, but they gave me a lot of insights about what was going to happen. And at a certain point, I still had like these kind of what I called spiritual battle. And I knew that many changes would come and that a lot of people would be added to my Facebook. One day 50, the other day 100, the other day 200, the other day every time multiplying. It just happened. And I knew that out of this, some people would come and reveal themselves. And I knew that I would meet somebody very special into that I was waiting for already 10 years, that voice had been speaking to me and had given very specific things like, this is how the person is going to be, so that I would recognize that person. So that happened in the months from September to December 2020. And I was like, I had already quite some questions, but I was still walking with that voice. And I had already seen that many things of the Bible were not exactly what I believed in. In these months, after having all these people added to my life through Facebook, it was like walking through hell. And I remember one night, I was listening a lot to Bible studies at night. I remember one night I felt so down, so deep into what I would call the pits of hell. I just called it like that. I heard that literal voice, Wiesje, come up here. I said, God, you know what? Many people would have loved to hear your literal voice. But you know what? I'm in hell. I don't care. It doesn't touch me. Your voice doesn't reach far enough. That was how I was talking to the Holy God. How whom he was for me.
Can I ask,
So
just to
yeah,
clarify, would you say with that kind of dynamic that you were questioning whether God was real or whether he was good, or like what was the actual questioning that was going on?
there was not a real question. I was so deep into all the things that were happening. I mean, like my family was falling apart. I was getting into a new divorce. Um, I was I was really in hell. I mean, it was the family tried to take my son away because that they thought I was so deeply radical Christian. So hearing like the literal voice of God that should have been deliverance was not even touching me. I was saying like many would have loved to hear your voice, but you know, just get me out of here. And that in that time, I got to know like quite some Pakistani people, and I knew I had to give up my job. So my family said I had a well-paid job. I was independent on the one hand as goldsmith, and on the other hand, I was doing freelance work for a carpet factory, and it was well paid. And I said, God has told me that I have to stop this and that I have to focus completely on Him. So my husband said, no, you have to listen to your husband. I am the head of the family. I said, I'm sorry, but if you stand in the way between God and you, I am going to choose God. Because I had proven already to him several times that when I said God said me to do this, that it had brought blessing into our family. So I had something like, if by now you not see that this thing is real, you have a problem, not I. And I am going to go through whatever I have to go to follow that voice. You are not going to come against me. But so it came against me very much into what we can call some kind of real persecution. So I got to know some of the Pakistani people and they invited me and I just knew I had to go. So I went with my son to Pakistan and I had my conference there. And it was all about connecting with God inside of you instead of with a God worshiping who is somewhere out there. I said, if you want to know really God, if you really want to heal in your life, that's where He is to find, in your heart. So I was preaching about that. And the lives were really touched. Certainly in Pakistan, where many things are very traditional and the image of what Pakistanis bring out of what is happening in Pakistan is really different than what is really happening inside there. So I lived with the people. I stayed with them. I got to know so many things. It was a huge experience. It was wonderful. Now, they asked me to come back as soon as possible. So it was still in the middle of Corona crisis. In Belgium, you could not even travel anymore. But my faith was so deep that I said, if I have to be there, nothing can stop me. Like really nothing. I went again for 2 weeks around Easter with the Easter holidays together with my son. But in that time frame, in between Christmas and Easter, I listened to documentaries about if Jesus really has lived or not. And I had that voice inside of me said, like, imagine that everything what you believed is not true. What would you choose? Would you choose to continue living that lie, or will you choose to continue what you have found? So I see myself walking with God here. We lived already here in France, having these conversations. I said, like, but what should I do? Should I go to Pakistan? And what can I preach if I am not even certain anymore that this message of Jesus dying on the cross is really true? I said, I cannot preach a lie. I am just not doing that. I'm not going there. I mean, I can say like, okay, I believe this, Now I believe that. But I cannot saying you should believe that when I don't do it myself. I mean, honesty and transparency is so high level for me that I have something like this I cannot do. And I was going to have another time my own conference in Pakistan. So I just had something like, what should I do? And then God just said, but you just tell the things that have become alive in your life. You don't have to preach the stuff of the Bible that you don't believe, that have not become alive. You preach what is life. So I said, okay, no problem. Then we go in that way. And nobody could travel, but I traveled with my son. They were laughing at customs in Brussels, like, this is an essential trip. I said, yes, of course, this is an essential trip. I mean, what is not essential about going and bringing good news? I mean, it is essential. So I was, the thing was like, at that point, Jesus and his message was to me not essential anymore. The essential thing was the connection between your inner being, whom I still called God, and myself. So people were threatening me at that point, other Christians, like, you are talking heresies, even if I had not yet denied Jesus. And they were saying, like, wait until you come before the throne of God. And I was laughing. I had something like, what do you think, that there will fall corpses out of the closet when I come before the throne of God? What do you think, that I have not come yet before the throne of God? You think that I don't know him? I know him. He knows me. I said, I don't have anything to hide. Everything that I have done already for years, he knows about. So there was nothing to hide. Now, when I came back from Pakistan the second time, I got into contact with a pastor from Uganda, and he was inviting me to go there in the summertime. Meanwhile, the divorce had been asked. So the divorce was almost done, and I was going to Uganda, not knowing where I would end up when I come back. I didn't have a visa. I just went there because you could not get through Corona. You could not really get a visa. So you had to go there and then ask a visa. When I got there, the others who had a visa were standing in line for such a long time, and we just got in. The lady said, how long you want to stay? I said, 2 weeks, but maybe longer. No problem. Here, 3 months. I said, this is marvelous. But the day before I went to Uganda, I went to a place in France where I always go to talk what I called God. And when I drove back, my car suddenly didn't work anymore. So I had to drive he got into safety mode. So I got back very slowly. I did 3 hours over something what I normally do over 1 hour. And it was so clear that that voice said, this trip is going to be very different than you are expecting. So I was like, okay. When I got there, instead of going to the orphans, going to preach, what I did is a couple of times, but everything fell in the water. Instead, I was there in the hotel. My son Doda had a wonderful time because there was a swimming pool. He could swim every day. He was just able to swim. And there was that one day that I had to preach for a YouTube channel of the greatest gospel singer of Uganda. And it was also recorded. And I see myself preaching of Revelation 2, verse 21 and 22 about waking up and not being lukewarm. And I hear myself shouting, and at that moment, shouting that people should wake up. And a couple of people who were in that church, because Corona, they could not be there, they were like, perfect preaching, so passionate, so true. And I knew that preaching would never come online. And I knew I had preached to myself to wake up myself. In these 2 weeks I had that I was there before, I didn't know where I would come back or if I would come back. I got to manage to have another place to live. And then so soon everything fell into understanding. It was just going very, very fast. Before I went to Uganda, I had been seeing the posts of wisdom. Here we come to wisdom. And I said, this guy is very arrogant in what he is writing. But I cannot deny that it triggers me and somewhere it resonates very deep within me. Already before I had had these experiences of seeing through what I would call the eye of God, seeing the whole universe, that everything is one, that nothing is out of it. And he had that too, in a similar kind of way. Now, I had that understanding about what is eating from the tree of life and what is eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So I understood that our brain is making this heaven and hell up as separating good and evil. And instead of believing the lies of our minds, because of this experience with the father of Doda, that I got him back, that I said, I should not believe every word that has been written, but I should see what has come alive. Now, Wisdom had added a post about the knowledge of good and evil, and God is good. Now, I just made him a little writing. I said, because I felt I had to say that to him. I was back from Uganda just a week, and I had very strange things happening. But I said to him, are you aware that the goodness of God, because they say God is good, God is perfect, God is love, that this is not the same as the good of knowing knowledge of good and evil? So he wrote me back. He said, can we have a call? I said, yeah, no problem. So we had our first talk, a very long talk. He was at that stage, I think, already more or less completely out of Christianity. But he said, you are giving me there an insight that is really interesting, because this explains how our brain works, that is judging all the time and bringing separation. And I understood that already. But I just had not linked this with that the whole thing of Jesus was made up to keep us into that bondage through history of what they had done. So it just went very fast. We started talking 13th of August. As he mentioned, 2.5 months later, I had sold my whole goldsmith thing, and I knew I had to go to Nigeria. I went there with Doda, and we were going to look how long I was going to stay, and it was just snapped out of me like that. There was not something like there were many questions or anything. It was just gone, because that inner voice, I just knew that inner voice that I called God is my soul, is my, let's just call it, higher being that is bringing me to awareness. It is that walk from the mind to the heart. It is what Jesus was really saying. Well, if he ever said that, what is written, like narrow is the road that leads to life, and very few find it. And I looked back and I said, who is walking this kind of walk in going so radical, giving up? Because I had something like, if Jesus said, take up your cross, I am going to take up my cross. If he says, sell everything, give it to the poor, come and follow me, I am following. But in that, I did not worship him. I had something like, you are giving an example, you are just standing next to me as if you would have like a husband and wife, you know. It was knowing oneness, but then with everyone, to that understanding of how the mind works, how the universe works. I had something like, I was already preaching months to look from the perspective of God to what we call God. But I understood people have another kind of perception of what I called God, you know, because that God was inside of me. So that is how it then easily went, and I was out of it. It was just over.
So were you basically at that point concluding you did not believe in the claims of Christianity, that you did not need a savior and Jesus was his death and resurrection was irrelevant to you?
I think I had that already just before I went for the second time to Pakistan. I said, I'm not going to preach Jesus anymore. And it was very easy because I could see how they had manipulated history. So, how many things am I believing of what is said in school that I can never prove if it's really true? So, am I willing to let these things open and not dive into them, not holding on to them as truths because I cannot prove them? And even before that, when I could not study fashion design, I had studied 1 year history at the university, and there we had one course that was talking about how many things that are manipulated in our media and in history. And this professor was just saying like 50% of what you believe is not true. I had to do like a big work, and I worked around the apartheid regime in South Africa. I had read as much as possible of scientific articles and all this kind of stuff about that. And then in that summer, I was 19, to go to South Africa. And I said, okay, I am going to see how this is now working, because they were saying there's no apartheid anymore and everything is gone. That was the year 1999. And I come there and I see that everything that I had read was just not true.
Hmm.
So it made that I have been quite skeptical about many things. Just I wasn't aware about how far things are being brought to us that we believe and are not there. Another example, my brother was for 6 months in Israel. He worked there. And here there was like news that there had been like an attack and that the whole of Jerusalem was almost in fire. So we are calling him in panic, and he says like, no, I'm not in danger. Nothing is happening. So it has made me aware over the years. I kept this in the back of my mind. Many things are said, but even if you go there yourself to look yourself, you are still looking with your outward eyes, and you are making your own subjective version of what you think is true because of your background and what you are thinking. I was aware that our mind has this kind of tendency. So at the end of that way that I had walked, it was very easy for me to connect the dots about how my brain had been working and how, to my opinion, wonderfully this inner voice had drawn me in safety out of Christianity without actually hurting me, but giving me like a lot of insights in how this thing really works. So this is why of course, there was a time that I had something like, please don't come with the name of Jesus. It's not necessary. But now I have something like, let them have their fun. It's, of course, many things happen and have happened certainly in my life because of that name of Jesus. But then looking back, being very honest with myself, having questioned myself, asking like, would you have wanted to have another kind of life, another kind of walk to come to this point? Would you even want this, all the abuse and all this stuff that has happened? Would you have wanted to be different? And I would say, like, no, no, nothing out of that story I would have canceled to know what I know now, to the measure of healing that it has brought to me, to and I can go very far in what, on the one side, this inner voice that I called God has healed me. It, of course, it's not a God who is up there, who is judging. No, 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 no. That's how our inner being can heal us from the deepest wounds that I know that many of the people that have gone through the same kind of mental and sexual abuse, they end up in psychiatry. Many kill themselves, commit suicide, have worst kind of life. And I have something like, by having had that walk, it has brought me above that. I can look these people in the eyes. I didn't even have to forgive them because I have seen the working of our universe that is so one, how it works and works everything out for the good to bring humanity to this higher awareness, to this higher consciousness that we can see that is happening in this time. No, I don't want anything to change in what has happened. It's another kind of story than most, but I'm happy I could live it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that stands out, and I think I would say I come to a different conclusion on some of the ways I would see the universe. I do see it very nihilistically, and I do see it as a very cold and harsh universe as opposed to a universe that's bringing us to a higher consciousness. I do see us, differently. But I think the one thing I would definitely say that stands out that we've just I love about your story is that you keep on bringing up the issue of, like, when things don't make sense, it you had to go on this journey, but it brought you to the point where you could open your eyes and say, maybe this narrative that I'd seen about Jesus, so about the church, about the gospel, whatever you'd say about the Bible, this narrative, it was in fact made up. It was heavily redacted. It was edited, and it was controlled, hyper controlled by
Absolutely.
church. And I love the phrase. I used to use it a lot. I don't know if I use it as much, but the idea of having a scope for the imagination to say, what if, like, for
Mhm.
example, what if there were, and we know this is true, but what if there were many, 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 many gospels originally, and we only
Mhm.
got four, but there were originally hundreds of them? What would that do for people's worldview? What if the Apostle Paul, upon whom so much of Christianity is based, what if you could have met him, or if you could, theoretically see a video of his life in real life, and you look at him
Absolutely.
and say, he's a really bad person. He's a jerk. Like he's a narcissist or whatever. What
Oh,
if
I,
just
I thought about Paul so many times like that.
But and that's
Oh, it
just
was
two
so
questions of
terrible.
thousands. But like just to say the what ifs, and what if we know, for example, there were many, many, many different kinds of Christianities originally, and some of them had some very extreme and bizarre behaviors that today we would look at and say they're so bizarre we're not even sure they're Christians, and yet
Mhm.
they were part of the original groups of Christians. Um, what if Christianity started and evolved differently than we ever imagined? And I love that you're bringing that to the forefront, because it's like that's such to have the ability to just start there, even if you don't know too much about all these little topics people go into. For someone like me or a listener to say, even if I don't know all the stuff that PhDs know, I can still imagine that this story was crafted and evolved. Therefore, I have to question it. Like you said, the word skepticism. I have to be skeptical that maybe this is not what I was told it was.
I think for me, um, I never really questioned too deep into it because of feeling that love. A big question that I had was about hell because I was feeling God, whom is love and who really loved me. And I had that love inside of me for everyone, even for those who had abused me to a level that people cannot understand. And I said, like, how is it possible that hell would exist? So I questioned that. I said that to that inner voice. I said, show me what it is. So I got to documentaries. I don't know. I always knew, like, I always got the information when I had to have it. I had that intuition all the time. I wasn't reading many books or anything. I just knew now I have to listen to this. I just knew. And that was always it. So there was, I don't know how he was called, but he was talking like first, that was the first time. Like hell is this hellfire is not that people are going to live forever in hell, being burned and scorned and all. No, they just evaporate. That's what is meant with um hellfire. They don't want to be with God. They don't want to be in his presence. So, okay, they don't want it. So after their life, it actually stops. That was the first time that I had something like, okay. I mean, as long as they are not tortured and all this kind of stuff, it's like, yeah, they don't want to be with God. They don't want to be anymore. They had their chance. Okay, if then it stops after life. I mean, many atheistic people say, like, okay, you only live once, so when they die, it's done. So I had something like, yeah, then maybe it's done, and those who want to continue, they can continue. I mean, I had some kind of peace that they would not be tortured and that they somewhere get what they want. Now, further on and longer, I really saw and went into the texts that were talking about not about hell as being that literal place, but where they say that Jesus was speaking about the place on the other side of the Temple Mount. And so,
But when you add that up, though, you still end up getting to a spot where you do still see Jesus and certainly Yahweh, but Jesus being very threatening. He talks about casting people into outer darkness a lot, where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. He does talk about fire. He talks a lot about destruction, and you end up very much in that conundrum where you have to say, I believe God is a God of love, and yet He's a God of incredible destruction, even of some of the people that are arguably just trying to figure out, you know, the universe and what's up with this world, what's up with their existence, and yet He's just ultra condemning and ultra harsh to so many people, to most of humanity, arguably. And it does end up, I think, giving you that question of like, is this really a God of love?
I had personally that assurance, I must be honest, in my heart that God would not be unjust. So what was written there was to me rather something like, I don't really understand what is meant, or they have written it differently than that it would literally pass like that. You understand? As I said, like in the beginning, when I had questions, I didn't question that voice inside of me. I just said, like, explain to me. And if I don't know, I will just get to know it on time when I have to know it. While I didn't have to focus on those things that were so painful for people. I must admit that I didn't really live a life very much between non-Christians. So I wasn't that much connected, and it didn't bring that much issue because I trusted that God would handle them that way. But I didn't think that he would handle them in the way it was written. You understand
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well,
Well,
I mean, that's the point. Eventually you do get to that different different ways to get to the same conclusion, but just to say,
yeah.
I cannot stand the idea of standing with a God who is all about destruction and hatred and
No.
violence. But I do want to ask, I know we're running out of time here. I do want to ask a few quick questions to maybe wrap us up.
Mhm.
How long ago, number one, how long ago did you fully deconvert?
I can say now that it is wait, huh? 2 years and a half, really,
Okay.
and that's sometime after Uganda. It just when I was crying out, wake up, I kind of woke up.
Hmm.
Um, it just struck me in that way, and
That's
yeah,
awesome. When you when you hit that spot, did you feel like you had much healing to do from Christianity and from what that worldview had done to you?
no.
Okay.
As I said, and this is a little bit like with wisdom story. It was just like you grow above it. I know many people, and I saw along the way many people who left Christianity in bitterness. That bitterness is not in me. Of course, I absolutely don't agree, and that I have something like I was tired of some discussions because in the beginning I was writing a lot on Facebook, and I had something like whatever, let it. I had something like, you guys just don't want to see it. But I had something like, let's just hope that one day they will see. But there was no bitterness in me. There was just that continuous flow of love that had already been there, continued, and has grown even. Um, yeah, no.
That's
And
awesome.
and I can easily see where there is bitterness and where there's still healing necessary. And even that, how would I say, my heart, in as much as I see that Christians are living in bondage and in lies, those who got out of it but are in bitterness and in pain are, I cannot say are, and are also in the lie. No, I mean, my heart bleeds for them because they need that healing, and I wish that sometimes that they could see from my perspective of how beautiful it also can be, how thankful we can be when we get out of the lie into the truth. Whatever truth one may believe or stand for or grow towards, we just continue our walk, our soul journey. And yeah, when I see that pain and that bitterness from the wounds of what Christianity has done, everything in me would want to help, would want to show like the other kinds of perspectives of the universe that can bring that inner healing, because it was that inner walk that has healed me. I cannot call it God. It was that inner walk, and I just called it God because I had no other idea of what it was.
Hmm,
So
that's
yeah.
awesome. Well, a final question to wrap us up for today. Where do you go from here? Like now that you have arrived at this conclusion, now that you've come so far with this, you've
Yeah.
obviously got a very different perspective as to how to use your time and your energy and talents. What do you foresee? Like, what do you want to do with the next, 5 to 10 years of your life and for the rest of your life, even? Like, what is your passion and how do you want to change the world to leave it, as I like to say, better than you found it?
The funny thing is that the prophecies that has been spoken over my life are coming true. um, I don't want to go into that, but it always makes me smile. Um, Wisdom and I write a lot about enlightenment and awareness and how we can come to that higher understanding of the mind and how the mind works, how the universe works. We look into that from the perspective of science, but most of all, we just look into ourselves. We continue looking into ourselves. I don't read much books. Yeah, sometimes I get videos of other people that I said, this is it. They are saying what I have seen in myself to be true. I look at how does the body work? How does it reflect that with the universe? How can I explain these things so that the people who are still in religion, that I can explain them what it really means? So, for example, with Nulle Femina, which is now on hold for a moment, I was able to explain to several Christians, like, look, what you understand as the story of creation and the Garden of Eden is not really what you understand, but this is like the real meaning. This is like the spiritual or mental meaning beyond it. And so Wisdom and I are writing a lot about this. Today, I just wrote my first blog post on my new website that I'm going to
Nice.
post later today.
I'll
So
put the
it
link beneath our video.
okay. um, it is really about coming to our higher understanding of whom we truly are as humanity and the universe. To my perspective, I just want to be love to the other people in my life. And I am at the moment walking with several people, and I am just walking with them in love, unconditional love. It's like I cannot call it an experiment because I have seen already that it works, but there are still religious people into it, non-religious people. There are rich, poor, all studied people, people who might not be that intelligent, like a scope of people. And it's like I am looking into what is blocking their soul to come to that awakening and knowing themselves deeply. Uh, I am meditating a lot about these things. So on the one hand, I am talking to their souls, and on the other hand, I am talking to the person in matter. And I am linking these things up because I want to see healing coming into their lives where there is brokenness. I mean, the brokenness can be in or or the not finding fulfillment or satisfaction in life can be on any kind of level in their lives. So I'm looking and investigating in that and trying to find the keys to bring them to that higher understanding of their being.
Interesting. But I will just say, I know we've gone through a lot, and I love that you bring such a passion to your story. I definitely see the world a little differently than the way you're describing. But
Mhm.
I will say that I love the fact that your focus is so much on love and on healing and on helping people to move past, bad ideas and to be able to see the universe, in a very different way than we were ever taught before. And, whether people, land in a much more materialistic perspective, which, was more the way I see it. I'm very much not into anything to do with souls or anything like that. If you know my channel, I'm very much a hardcore nihilist materialist. But you still the
There's also
focus.
part of it. Huh?
I was gonna say the focus, though, I think of your story, though, we align a lot in that you're trying to look at people who are hurting and who are, arguably and maybe in different mental prisons, emotional prisons, and to say there is a very different way to see the world that is not a prison. It's not a prison anymore, and you don't have to be stuck in these bad ideas, but you do have to start with the idea that maybe the worldview you've got has some assumptions that may be incorrect. And I love that. I mean, that's where the alignment is very strong. And I think that's so critical because most people can't. They can't just to admit to say, I might be completely wrong in my worldview, just as
Mhm.
or even just that major chunks of it are wrong. Even
Yeah.
say that is just it's just a non-starter. You can't go there because it's too scary. Because the frightening thing is if I'm wrong about my worldview, then I've wasted a lot of time. And, possibly even if I even question this, it's the devil or, becoming a heretic and I'm in danger of, hellfire because of that. Whatever it is, there's all these reasons to be afraid of seriously questioning and to be able to step back from the edge and say, wait a second, like we basically just we keep on inheriting our
Mhm.
worldviews from our parents and from our culture to say just because we've inherited it doesn't mean we have to throw everything out about it, but we can question it very profoundly. We don't have to adopt everything they've told us.
The thing is, that was a Bible verse that one of the few of Paul that I took as an example. That he said, "But for Christ's sake, I have counted everything as rubbish." Now, how I see that is that how much am I capable of setting aside everything that I thought to be true, and do I dare to question myself continuously? That's what I understood from that verse. I know they will give a complete other explanation, but that was to me what it was. And that has brought many questions like, if I think that this is true, um, can I put it aside and question it again and again and again? And I'm doing this to this day. Even yesterday, I was like, imagine that again, you have to set aside the things that you are walking now in. Are you able to do that without any problem? Is there any shame or anything because you have walked this walk? And it's not. I have something like, I am just as a human being walking this walk, and in truth and honesty towards myself, walking and saying things. I must admit that there are times that I have something like, I'd rather be silent and say nothing and just look at everything, instead of saying things that then afterwards I might say like, I wasn't really correct on that. Again, because I don't like to say things that are not true. But then, from the point of the universe, seeing what I see, everything as one, I also know there's nothing for me, there's nothing out of balance, nothing to fight. So I have something like, in this, I maybe have to speak out, just as you, from your perspective and what you have gone through and the work that you are doing, bring your fragrance in this world. And I think that's just really wonderful. That's so beautiful that when you have seen these kind of things, you do something with it. As I understood, you even do this as a full-time job, giving voice to the people who want to bring out, because it's like what would they have said, people that are suddenly saying like, okay, I'm coming out, I'm gay. It's like, well, I was Christian, but now I am not anymore. Sometimes it feels like that. So yeah, I'm happy for what you're doing. I'm
Yeah,
thankful.
likewise, very much so. Well, I feel like we've got a whole big box of topics we could pick into for a future date. But this has been a great introduction to kind of what you're doing, and I'd love to pick your brain and wisdoms as well. You all are like a magic tag team of ideas. But thank you so much. This has been great to hear your story, and I'm very sad for some of the real heartbreaks you've had to go through to get to this point. But I'm so overjoyed that you've been able to take what was bad and heal and come at it at a perspective where you're taking what was very sad and making something beautiful out of it in the end. And that's in so many people's stories, like that's a pivotal part of it as well. It's not just escaping, but then what do you do next with all you've been through? And for many people, as part of healing, you do have to eventually turn your vision from inside, like what happened to me and my story and my aches and pains and my journey, to how can I take it and start to help other people. And I love that you're doing that. It's so critical, and it's so helpful to hear the fact that you and Wiesje, not just in a philosophical sense, but even in a very practical sense with the LoveWise initiative and the other things you do. Just the fact that you and Amadou are, in your wisdom, are doing things to change this world practically. Like people are hurting, and I love it. You're just like I would have said, I need to help people because of Jesus, help people because of the gospel, help people because of the kingdom and future rewards. You're just loving on people, but you're not doing it for any reward. You're just loving people because you just choose to. And that's golden. I mean, that's the money shot. It's so good to be able to just help people with no reward in mind. You just want to love people. That's a great way to live your life. Well, I do want to wrap us up here, but did you have any final thoughts before we do?
I don't know. I talk so much.
Well, I'm sure things will come to mind, so we'll save those for a follow-up. But no worries. But thank you again. This has been awesome to get to know you. And I'll just wrap up by saying we've been speaking with Wiesje Verpeut. Did I get close?
Yeah, very
Okay.
close.
Very close. Wiesje Verpeut. And Wiesje, thank you so much. Great to hear your story. Great to get to know you. And let's definitely do it again sometime.
Thank you. I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.